Hey everybody, it's Bob. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Today, we're going to talk about insider threat, specifically how it's tailored towards the private sector. Come on, let's talk. Hey everybody, welcome back. Hey Katie, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm excited. I like talking about this. I did this for a long time, but today's topic, insider threat. And I think it's an extremely misunderstood term in the private sector. And honestly, I've seen a lot of people talking about this on different social media outlets, and I don't. Some of it I don't think is right at all. Others, I think it's still a little confusing the way they try to apply it to the private sector.
Yeah, but you did this for a long time, have lots of knowledge on it. But what are you talking about when you talk about insider? Is this a spy? Is this an employee? Is
No, see,
this
I think the reason this is all misunderstood, quite frankly, insider threat was the United States intelligence uh, term. And really, if you talk to anybody that's been in the FBI, NSA, DoD, CIA, you name some three-letter abbreviated agency, when you say insider threat, people really think of spies. And when I think of spies, I think of people that have clearances that are stealing stuff to give to a foreign power, blah, 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 blah.
you think of it in a government setting?
I can tell you because I was there. That's what this term was built around, and I think the private sector has adopted it, and I think they've adopted it out of necessity. I think it's the wrong term, and we can talk about that a little later. I mean, but it conjures things in your mind if you know what you're doing. It's not really what the private sector is trying to talk about, and I think the reason that's an important issue is because if you're talking about it and the name exudes certain things that people that know what they're doing actually believe it is versus what it really is in the private sector, I think it causes confusion. And that confusion, I can tell you, I've seen in big corporations around the country, around the world actually, that have asked me to consult on or talk to them about insider threat, you know?
How is it different in the corporate environment?
Well, going back, like I said, spy's a spy. That's somebody that's in, it's got a clearance inside the United States government usually, and they're trying to steal stuff to go to a foreign power, or they're in the USIC someplace. I think inside the corporate world, when you're talking about, and let's just call it insider threat for now, I have different terms for this, but you're talking, it splits, it bifurcates immediately in two different situations. So inside a corporation, I don't care if you have a little teeny corporation or a giant corporation, you've got people that are working for you. And so you've got a trusted insider employee that may do something inadvertently that causes damage to your company or potentially information that you want to keep close hold because it's proprietary trade secret that you don't want anybody else to know to get out. Right. And that could be, we can talk about that all day long, right? It could be clicking on the wrong email. It could be answering the phone and somebody convincing you that, it's actually Bob and you need to reset my admin pass, all that stuff.
Mhm.
But it's a trusted employee that's not trying to hurt anybody. They're just trying to get through their day, right? They're rushing to get their kids or they're rushing to go meet their wife. There's a million reasons for it, but they do something inadvertently. They're still a good employee. By the way, this is how like 99% of all major cyber breaches happen. It's not like, whatever, but when we're
Not
talking,
intentional.
no, it's not. It's usually because the attack vectors are so much different. But the point is for insider threat, it splits in two immediately. And for any company, it's kind of hard to understand because you have to handle the threat from conscientious employees that aren't trying to do anything wrong and they just accidentally click or do whatever. But then you have a malicious insider that is intentionally trying to destroy the company, steal from the company, provide access to the company. And by the way, this could be from anybody. It could be a criminal organization. It could be just what they're trying to do. It could be because they either knowingly or unknowingly are being directed by a nation state to do it. And that's a whole nother world we can get into if we want to talk about it. But it really bifurcates. And so for most cases, in my experience inside the private sector, this is why I think the term is all jacked up and wrong. I don't think they should be using the term insider threat, is because most of the time, this is not, if something bad happens to the company, it's because that good conscientious employee has done something unintentionally.
Mhm.
That's a whole separate thing compared to looking for and trying to stop somebody that's in your company before they have the opportunity to actually take, steal, disrupt, or destroy your
Still a
organization.
risk you wanna manage and mitigate and try to avoid, but different from knowingly stealing information.
It's way different, and the problem is with this, and there's a lot of rules in the government that are actually advantageous to doing insider threat, which I'm not gonna get into how the government does it or how I ran it when I was in the government, but there's a lot of rules in the corporate environment that actually, kinda help prevent, stifle, slow down, or the ability to holistically look at somebody in the corporate world. A lot of rules around HR, a lot of rules around medical stuff, a lot of rules around stuff that happens outside the organization. And quite frankly, a lot of companies don't even take the time when they hire you or when you're working on their systems to either put banners on there or put statements in your contract that the information's not yours, it's theirs. They can search it anytime they want. They can look at it. They can find a lot of companies don't do that because they feel like, oh, it's going to stifle, it's going to slow down. People are going to think I'm Big Brother. And that's the problem. And so there's a bunch of stuff with that. But I really think inside the corporate environment, it's more about internal risk mitigation. And that's what I would use. That's the term if you went to andersonglobal.com or whatever, that's what you're going to see on my website. I look at it as an internal risk mitigation, not the word insider threat, because most of what you're mitigating is not a malicious insider. It's somebody that's going to do something that's going to hurt the corporation inadvertently. That's where the confusion comes in. Where you say insider inside the United States government, it is definitely a spy. It is somebody that is going to destroy or steal or provide. In the private sector, again, it bifurcates. And I think that's the problem. I don't think people understand that. I think it's a bigger problem than people think. And I think when I hear people talking about it on all these social media things, you can tell they don't have the kind of experience. They just throw out a term, generically. It's like somebody in a meeting that just wants to throw out a bunch of acronyms, and be the smartest acronym guy or gal in the room, and they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. But that's what I'm saying. That's one of the reasons I want to talk about it today.
But it sounds like you do have the scale. The employee you've talked about that accidentally is just moving too quickly and somehow, sends the wrong information or makes it available unintentionally. Maybe you have the employee that worked on an innovation that the company owns but thinks it's theirs, and they are leaving the company, they've gotten fired, they've been asked to leave, and they
Yeah,
they feel like I worked on this, I've dedicated my life to this, I'm taking it with me.
that happens a lot, believe it or not.
And then you have, the people that may be directed by a criminal organization or a nation state that are
Yeah.
knowingly taking information that will, deliver harm to that company or give somebody a greater advantage.
Yeah, or they're directed, right?
Mhm.
Either they know they're being directed by an intelligence or they don't know. And a lot of
Mhm.
times they don't know. They think it's just maybe another business guy or gal asking them because they're going to hire them into this new company. They don't understand that whole company is a front for China, Russia, or whatever. I mean, it can get very complicated, to include threats on their families or whatever. But the reality is, I think, the easiest way to look at this, when you look at it, a government insider threat, the easiest one I can bring up is Ed Snowden. So
Mhm.
you look at somebody who was sitting inside, multiple intelligence agencies, multiple cleared contractors that work with
Mhm.
agencies. The person's on the inside. He knows he's going to steal stuff. He knows he's going to take stuff with him. He knows he's going to give it to a foreign power, again, inside a government, right? And he takes a deliberate action to then take that information and get it to a foreign power. That's like a traditional government insider threat. I mean, we indicted him in days when I was running that investigation for espionage. What I'm talking about outside of that, though, and I think there's just been several others. I think maybe you brought up today about the DIA guy
Well,
that
this is not
had
only
been
working in a military environment, where you think you're
right.
you're more of a probably a rule follower, and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
things,
definitely. Yeah.
but working in the insider, risk area. Like
Yeah.
your
I mean,
whole mission
yeah.
in life right now is to prevent this from happening, and you, because of whatever, personal motivation you have, decide to become the insider, threat yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, you want to talk about hitting the jackpot. If you're the person that recruited that guy into that position, you can damage a government organization incredibly. But I think when we're looking at government, Ed Snowden's a good example. when you look at the private sector, you may have some examples out there, but quite frankly, most aren't prosecuted. Most are either done through civil litigation or whatever, depending on what they steal and how they steal it. A lot of what you brought up earlier, like I invented this, I'm just taking it with me. And by the way, there's a tough argument there when that guy or gal gets in court and said, I didn't see anything on my computer. No one told me this wasn't mine, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah. So it goes back to how the companies have to protect that and have to put enough rules and regulations around it to make a court believe, yeah, this is a trade secret or proprietary information. But getting
Mhm.
back to the actual employee itself, when we talk about the second half of this, like the guy or gal that's actually in there to do damage, the guy or gal that's actually in there to hurt your company in the private sector, it's my opinion that a lot of these companies don't take that part of it as serious as they should, because a lot of those people that are doing that are very sophisticated and they know how to take information outside. Because once you're in, you're behind the firewall, right? You know the security procedures within the company. You know if you can walk in or out of a cordon off portion of the company with documents, with thumb drives, with computers, with whatever. And I think that makes it a lot more significant.
So, what is your recommendation for companies that are trying to look at this the right way and set up the right program internally? Like, what can they do to reduce this risk?
I got to tell you, there's only been very few, honestly, and I'm not knocking everybody because again, everything's cost, right? Everything's about a budget. But
Mhm.
I've worked with a lot of companies. I've worked with two or three very large companies on this, and very few do it right. There's been one or two that I've worked with that I think have done it right, and I think they've taken it seriously. I think they're putting the right amount of money, the right amount of people, tying it within all the organizations. And what I mean by that, insider threat or risk mitigation, internal risk mitigation, it needs to have windows into a lot of the parts of the company that traditionally they don't want to talk to anybody,
It's
right?
not just like a corporate security function.
No. Matter of fact, that's where a lot of companies go wrong. Gates, guards, locks, all that gadgets. Oh, I got it. No, not really. It's all about the people. And this is where you usually get pushback. If it's a big enough company to do it, it's not money, it's not internal struggles, it's not moving people around. The two or three places you really get into problems with setting up a real insider threat program is policies, usually around HR, EAP, employee assistance program, coordinating physical security with cybersecurity with insider threat. And traditionally, all these things are honestly like the United States intelligence community used to be before 9/11. I mean, honestly, they're
Mhm.
very walled off. They're very stovepipe. They don't want to talk to you.
Mhm.
They're not going to give anybody information about the person because it's HR. I'm not going to talk to you because these are physical security things. I don't want to talk to you cyber. You're the guys that sit in there and do all this weird cyber stuff. I mean, I hear this all the time. And being able to pull that all together, I will tell you, without the CEO of a giant company, you're never going to do it. Don't
Mhm.
care. He could give you contract for 10 years and millions, millions, millions of dollars. It really is breaking down the policies and roadblocks within the own company that unknowingly these people are contributing to insiders, because without that holistic look, and here's why, and this is the most important thing I'm going to say today. When Bob comes into your company, if you've got technology, if you've got something that somebody potentially may intentionally want to steal or harm your company, you have to have a cradle to grave of Bob. Like, you have to see Bob from the day you hire him to the day Bob retires, because you don't know where in that continuum Bob has started to get ticked off. Bob needs money. Bob just got a DUI and was divorced and beat his wife up and got arrested. By the way, you know none of this.
Mhm.
And now he's in trouble, right? And so now he needs to do something. And so all of a sudden it triggers Bob into doing something he never would have done 5 years ago. And when I say that, people go, well, there's no way we can do that because, there's no way HR is going to talk to us, EAP, physical security, they never talk to us. There's this odds. And honestly, it brings back horrible memories after 9/11, because I will tell you, and this is what Bob Mueller and a lot of other people in the USIC that were running organizations did well, is they knocked all that down. Because I can tell you, when I was a criminal agent, we didn't talk to counterintelligence agents.
Mhm.
There were no cyber people. I mean, CTD didn't talk to criminal, meaning counterterrorism. I can go right down the line. Like, it was very stovepiped. After 9/11, it almost became too much. But inside an organization, there has to be an area. I'm going to call it internal risk mitigation area, where that area has anonymous, autonomous, whatever type of reporting that they can holistically see the company. And here's the key, and this is what nobody gets. And by the way, this is the same for spies. To do this right and to do this the way it should be done, nobody should go bad. Nobody should steal anything. Nobody should get in trouble. And people go, what the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about if you set this up right, I should be able to go to Katie or Bob or Jim or Jonathan or Ben or whoever prior to them going off the reservation and stealing something, right? And getting in trouble, possibly arrested, possibly going to go, whatever, before it happens. Like that's how this is supposed to work.
So if I understand you correctly, there's a way to set up a program that's not only effective in keeping, the company strong, their information within the company and protected in an
Right.
adequate way, but also in the best interest of the employee, right? So when something is occurring in their life, they're not vulnerable to being recruited or reliant or they need money or whatever it may be, that they have to do something that's on the wrong side.
That's right. And so that's why I go back to insider threat is different in my mind in the private sector, and it should be, I call it internal risk mitigation. Here's why. If I come to you in a private company and I say, hey, I'm from the insider threat unit, I want to talk to you about Katie, that person's guard goes through the roof.
Immediately. And the people all
Katie.
around.
I like Katie. I'm not talking, what are you trying, but if I come to you and go, I'm from the internal risk mitigation, I want to talk about, Katie has been talking to this guy and we're trying to help her. All of a sudden, everybody wants to talk to you. And then people can say, I'm right or wrong. Look, I know for a fact inside a lot of organizations in the government, after Snowden and after Hansen and after a lot of, we revised a lot of things. And I'm not going to get into details. When people could actually report somebody that it was completely anonymous and autonomous from whoever they're dealing with, those things went through the roof. And by the way, if they're nothing, you throw them out. Like people think, what are you going to?
But if I can anonymously report and say, hey, I'm concerned about somebody, it's not going to penalize me. I'm not going to, lose my job. They're not going to necessarily lose their job either. But I can say there's a concern. Maybe they need mental health support. Maybe they need.
They're drinking too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And see, what people don't believe, that there's a lot to this. And that's why I don't think, because for most, it's not about arresting somebody. Like, yeah, do we do it? Are the FBI and everybody, state, local, still doing it? The answer is yeah. But if you do this right, and if you set up an insider threat, internal risk mitigation thing inside the private sector, you should be able to stop this before it happens. You should see a trend with Bob or Katie. They're late for work. They're coming in on the weekends. They haven't done that in 15 years. They're going to different areas. They haven't done that in like the last 12 years.
They're taking work home with them.
Take work. And by the way, they've got all this financial and emotional and family problems. And by the way, you're not using it against them or blabbing it to everybody else. You're trying to help them. You're trying to stop them. People don't get that. And I've tried to communicate this for years. Some do. The guys or gals that set this up right, they get it immediately. And they knock down all those different walls, and you are able to set up a program that follows somebody cradle to grave, and you can stop them before something goes wrong. And guess what? It's the best thing for everybody. Because I got news for you. People that are spies in the government or people that are stealing very sophisticated classified technology in the private sector, if they're doing it, they've been doing it for a long time. You didn't stop them the day they did it. If you set up a real internal risk mitigation section that's holistic to the company that can see the totality. Because think about this. HR has no idea about 70% of what outside of what HR handles that's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Say there's a manager that doesn't want the hassle of telling you your PAR sucks. All HR sees is you're getting payroll, you're getting healthcare, and you got a great PAR. They don't know what else is going on with you. They don't know that you're combative every day you walk in there. If I know what the manager is saying, now I know that piece of it, right? And, you can go right around that tree. All of a sudden, physical security is saying, wait a minute, this person's coming in. By the way, your manager may or may not know that. HR definitely doesn't know, right? And you see what I'm saying? As you add this wheel in, all of a sudden, you have a real clear picture, and you can focus down to certain people that you don't necessarily want to go arrest, but you can take those people and give them help beforehand so they don't go off the reservation.
And for the areas where there is a real concern, so somebody can anonymously report it and not be after the fact and say, "Oh, I had suspicions about that person. Oh, they were coming in at odd
100%.
hours. They didn't talk to anybody." Like let's address that and make sure that my job, my company, is as sound and strong as possible.
That's right. And I think the last thing I would say on the internal risk mitigation is train everybody. And you don't train them as this is an insider threat. This person's going to be this, because people immediately get their back up about that. What you need to do is say, hey, listen, here's the big picture. Explain it like I did. Hey, whole bunch of you are going to make mistakes in your career. And yeah, you might cause, if you're unlucky, you're going to cause a bunch of, machinations in the company because you're going to click on something, do something, blah, blah, blah. There's a few of you that honestly you don't know now, but 10 years from now, you might have a problem. You might need some help. We encourage you to talk to us about it. And then occasionally you might want to bring up, and by the way, if you're down on your luck and you're visiting foreign countries for us and doing this, you may have people approach you from different organizations. And those people might say they're from company A or B. But you know what? When you come back, maybe you do talk to our physical security guys, because they'll tell you, nope, that was an intelligence officer trying to get you to do that. That is the best bet. Like, get out in front of this and stop. The name in itself is not what's going on, in my opinion, in the private sector. That's a government term, and it applies very well to what the government does. But inside the private sector, you have to look at it different, because I think you have different things to worry about. And by the way, you said it best, Katie, is you're looking out for your employees. It shows you care about them. And I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. But certainly it requires more partners within a company than just the security team.
More partners, more holistic look, and everybody's got to trust one another. I speak from experience. I went through this after 9/11. So did thousands of other people in the USIC and the FBI. And by the way, it works better. Back then we didn't talk to anybody that wasn't doing it. Now we talk to everybody, and it just works better. So I think it's a good conversation. And if you're out there running a company, or I don't care how big it is or small, everybody's got a budget, but it's something you should think about, especially if you've got technology or something that is going to be good for the next 20 years of this company. You need to take the time to think about this and think about what you're calling it, because I think that makes a big deal difference, because one applies to the government, in my opinion. I did it for years, and one is more a private sector term. Hey, thanks for coming back to the podcast, everybody. Stay tuned. We got a lot of great interviews coming up soon with a bunch of different American heroes. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it very much. Peace. Love each other. We need it.